I'm Graham Dale. The Conservative Party and Reform UK have each declared that one of their flagship policies for the next general election will be to withdraw Britain from the European Convention of Human Rights, the ECHR. The convention is never far from the news, and rightly so. It's a good idea that's gone badly wrong over time and is well past its sell-by date. The ECHR should not, of course, be confused with the European Union's Charter of Fundamental Rights, nor should the ECH Court be confused with the EU's European Court of Justice. They're entirely distinct and separate. Britain, through the energetic leadership of Winston Churchill, was the driving force behind the creation of the Council of Europe. And the ECHR was designed to codify into a binding treaty the rule of law, democracy, and human rights protections that had been trampled underfoot by the Nazi jackboot. Thankfully, we in Britain have never suffered the dreaded extrajudicial midnight hammering on the door to be dragged from our beds and shot or sent to a concentration camp. And so it was not originally intended that Britain would be a signatory to the convention. However, as it was a British idea promoted by Winston Churchill, as of course was the European Union, it was felt necessary that Britain should subscribe to show its support. One of the first acts of Tony Blair's government was the passing of the Human Rights Act 1998, which incorporates all the provisions of the ECH law into UK domestic law. Inevitably, where empire-building lawyers are involved, in the nearly 70 years since the ECHR court was established, there has been an uncontrolled process where it's extended its jurisdiction by regarding the convention as what they refer to a living document that must, in the lawyer's opinion, take account of unforeseen and unforeseeable factors since when it was first established. It's a veritable permanent dripping roast of gravy for the lawyers to dip their bread. The court's sphere of influence and control now covers almost every aspect of the human condition and has led to many bizarre judgments that have brought the ECHR into serious disrepute. Controversial judgments against the UK have primarily centred on national security, deportations, prisoner rights, immigration, counter-terrorism, and the environment, including climate change. Successive British governments have been hamstrung by human rights lawyers using the provisions of the ECHR through the Human Rights Act to frustrate its efforts in prosecuting policies for which it has a mandate from the people. Since 2018, over 200,000 illegal migrants have come to Britain via rubber dinghies. A majority of the British people want this stopped, but the government has no effective policy to deal with the crisis without falling foul of the ECHR, as enshrined in Blair's Human Rights Act. In addition to this shameful shambles, there have been some extremely bizarre decisions by judges in the immigration tribunals. For example, a case where an Afghan serial sex offender was jailed for 12 weeks for outraging public decency and exposure. He avoided deportation and was granted refugee status after his human rights lawyer claimed it would be a breach of his human rights to send him back to his homeland because there they wouldn't tolerate his behaviour and he would be exposed, well, no pun intended, to ill treatment and possibly mob violence if he continued with his sexual exhibitionism. So on his release from prison, presumably after serving a third of his sentence, he'll feel free to carry on flashing as before, but safe in the knowledge that he can continue to rely on the largesse of the British taxpayer, welfare state and prison service to keep him housed, fed and safe. There are many others which I won't annoy you by reciting, but some involve serious violent criminals, rapists, paedophiles, and convicted drug dealers who are not deported as they claim a right to a family life here in Britain. The fact that the convention is being so blatantly abused and human rights lawyers are so blatantly cashing in, combined with the government's inability to deal with illegal migration, has rightly led to demands for Britain to withdraw from the convention. Well, can Britain leave? Theoretically, yes. Withdrawal can be easily achieved by serving 6 months' notice on the Council of Europe under Article 58 of the Convention. However, such a move would be very difficult to implement unless a centre-right government has a mandate and a significant majority for it in Parliament, as the Labour Party, the Liberal Democrats, the Greens, the SNP, Plaid Cymru, many in the Conservative Party, a majority in the Lords, and the all-consuming blob would try to kibosh it, a la Brexit. In addition, Northern Ireland and the Belfast Good Friday Agreement will be weaponised by the ECHR Remainers to frustrate it. The special status of Northern Ireland and the Irish government's manufactured border issue was used by Remainers to try to block Brexit. Well, they very nearly succeeded, but the penalty exacted for their failure was the dreadful Northern Ireland Protocol and even more dreadful Windsor Framework. The lawyers in favour of keeping Britain shackled to the ECHR and the maintenance of their lucrative gravy train would similarly try to use the references to the ECHR in the Good Friday Agreement to stymie withdrawal. Their argument is already being made to the effect that the ECHR is mentioned in the Good Friday Agreement not simply en passant, but integral and fundamental to it. They claim that the effect of this incorporation simply means that if the UK, which of course includes Northern Ireland, leaves the ECHR, it will be a fundamental breach of the agreement and endanger peace. It's further claimed that the government of the Irish Republic, as co-signatories of the agreement, will not allow Britain to leave, and their influential backers and supporters in America and the EU have already threatened punitive action to make life very difficult for the UK should we in any way compromise the agreement. This point has been addressed by Lord Wolfson of Tredegar in his report to the Conservative Party, advising on the legality and practicality of leaving the ECHR. Wolfson's conclusions are that it would be entirely legal for the UK to leave the convention under Article 58, and that the British-Irish Treaty and the accompanying multi-party agreement that together comprise the Good Friday Agreement contain nothing that would be an impediment to it. One possible solution put forward by the few politicians who seem to be aware of the potential problem is that the UK, excluding Northern Ireland, could leave the ECHR, thus rendering it inapplicable to Northern Ireland only. This strikes me as being something of a dog's breakfast. A far simpler suggestion is that the whole of the UK, including Northern Ireland, could leave the ECHR, and the convention protections conferred in the agreement could be repeated through a contemporaneous Northern Ireland Bill of Rights. My understanding is that Wolfson also agrees that there's no provision in the Good Friday Agreement that would oblige the UK, including or excluding Northern Ireland, to remain in the ECHR. Britain withdrawing from the ECHR can be achieved legally and practically, but the dirty fight that will inevitably be mounted against it by the chameleon Remainers will be difficult to overcome without a significant majority in the Commons who want it and can force it through. Thank you for listening.